Welcome, everybody, to our deep dive. We're going to get into a fascinating topic today, the Buddhist concept of diligence, or sundru.
That's right.
We're going to be using the joyful endeavor of the Buddhist Path as our guide for today.
Great book.
Yeah, it goes deep into Shantideva's Diligence Chapter, and when we think about diligence, we often think about, oh, I got to push myself, got to work harder. But this book is really about finding joyful effort and finding that kind of sustainable energy that comes from within.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not like, just gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's really more about, like the book talks about harnessing the wind to propel a sailboat. It's not about brute force, but it's about a skillful and sustainable way to move forward.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It's like, you can push a sailboat, I guess, but the
Yeah.
wind is really what's going to get you there.
The book even talks about, this soccer superstar Ronaldo. It says, talent is great, but consistent, joyful effort is what makes you a champion.
Oh, wow. So it's really about taking that natural ability, but then
Ah.
finding a way to make it sustainable. So if it's not about pushing ourselves to the point of burnout,
Right.
how do we actually tap into this joyful effort? We all have those days when even getting out of bed feels like a chore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whew.
Well, the book, it addresses that directly, actually. It identifies 3 types of laziness, or ways that we get stuck.
Okay.
And there's surprisingly relatable, I think.
Hmm.
So the first one is jeluki lelo. This translates as clinging to idleness.
Clinging to idleness.
And it's more than just needing rest. It's an attachment to inactivity itself.
Oh, so it's not just about, oh, I just need to take a break.
Right.
I actually want to stay in this inactive state.
Yeah, there's like a
I can relate to that.
comfortableness to it.
Yeah, like that just one more episode feeling before you go to bed, even though you know you have to get up early.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a perfect example. And then the second type of laziness is jawan and chinjielo. So this is distraction by the mundane. These are those tasks that keep us busy,
Okay.
but don't actually move us towards our goals.
Oh, okay. So like when I spend an hour reorganizing my desk instead of, tackling that big project that I've been putting off,
Yes.
I definitely do that sometimes.
That is such a classic example. And it feels easier in the moment, right, to do those less important tasks.
Yeah.
But they ultimately just create more clutter.
Yeah, mental clutter.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've got the clinging to idleness and the distraction by the mundane. What's the third type of laziness?
Okay, so the third one might surprise you. It's daknin yepe lelo, self-sabotage through low self-esteem.
Low self-esteem. I don't usually think of that as laziness.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of counterintuitive.
It seems almost like the opposite in some ways.
Yeah, but it's basically clinging to a negative self-image.
Right.
It's saying, I'm not capable, I'm not worthy, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And the book actually has this great line. It says, if others have done it, why not me?
That is a good question. Yeah, it is kind of it's like you're almost creating an excuse.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
saying, well, they can do it, but I can't.
Right, and we limit ourselves unnecessarily so often by doing that.
Yeah.
By telling ourselves that we're not capable, when in fact we might be.
It's interesting how that negative self-talk can really sabotage our efforts before we even get started.
Exactly.
Okay, well, now that we know what to avoid, how
Right.
do we actually cultivate the kind of effort that doesn't feel like a constant uphill battle? I love this idea of joyful effort, but it still seems a bit paradoxical.
It does, and that's where the practices from the book come in.
Mm.
One of the most striking things the book says is that reflecting on death,
Okay.
while it might seem intense, can be a powerful motivator for joyful effort.
Death. I thought we were supposed to be talking about joy here.
I know, right?
Not facing my mortality.
It sounds a little bit counterintuitive.
But I'm open to hearing you out.
Yeah, so the book uses this analogy of we're all kind of like oblivious livestock in a slaughterhouse.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we're completely unaware of our fate.
Mhm.
Right? It's not meant to be morbid, but it's meant to kind of shake us out of that complacency.
Yeah. I get that. It's like it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget that, this is not going to last forever.
Exactly. And so if we're constantly thinking, oh, I'll get to that later, or I have plenty of time, we risk missing out on the opportunity to really live.
Right.
So by reflecting on impermanence, we can start to prioritize what really matters and make the most of this precious life that we have.
Okay, so it's not about like dwelling on the negative or being afraid of death.
Right.
It's about using that awareness to fuel a more joyful and engaged life.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So how do we translate that awareness into action?
Yeah, that's the key question, right?
Yeah, does the book offer any specific practices for cultivating this kind of joyful effort?
It does. It does. One set of practices that I think are particularly helpful are the four immeasurables.
Mm.
These are love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity.
Okay, those sound like wonderful qualities to cultivate,
Mm.
but I'm not sure how they actually connect to the idea of joyful effort.
Right.
It's not just about being nice to people.
No, it's much deeper than that.
Yeah.
These qualities are really about actively training the mind and the heart. So, for example, love in this context isn't just a fleeting feeling, it's a genuine wish for all beings to be happy. And when you approach your actions with that kind of love, even challenging tasks can become infused with a sense of purpose and joy.
So it's about shifting your underlying motivation. It's
Yeah.
not just about forcing yourself to do something you don't want to do. It's about like tapping into a deeper source of inspiration.
Exactly.
Okay, and how does compassion fit into this?
So compassion is really about understanding the suffering of others and wanting to help alleviate it. And this can fuel our joyful effort because it connects us to something bigger than ourselves.
Okay.
So when we act out of compassion, we're tapping into this deep well of empathy and altruism, which can be incredibly motivating.
That's powerful. Yeah, it's like you're not just doing it for yourself anymore. You're doing it to contribute to the well-being of others.
Right, right.
What about sympathetic joy? That one seems particularly challenging in a world where comparison and competition are so prevalent.
It is. Sympathetic joy is the ability to genuinely rejoice in the successes of others,
Okay.
even when you might be struggling yourself.
So instead of feeling threatened by someone else's success,
Yeah.
we can actually find joy in it.
Yes.
That seems like the opposite of that comparison trap we were talking about earlier,
It is.
where low self-esteem can really sabotage our efforts.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, we have equanimity. And this is about cultivating a balanced mind, free from judgment and prejudice. It's about seeing all beings as equal and worthy of compassion, regardless of their circumstances or how they treat you.
That sounds incredibly challenging, especially in the face of, difficult people or situations.
It is. It's a practice, and it takes time and it takes patience. But cultivating equanimity allows us to approach life with a sense of inner peace and stability, even when things are chaotic around us.
Yeah. So it's not about like pretending that everything is okay. It's about not letting external circumstances dictate our internal state.
Exactly.
Okay, so these four immeasurables, they're not just abstract ideals.
Right.
They're actually practical tools for transforming our mindset
Absolutely.
and cultivating a more joyful and sustainable approach to effort. Are there any specific practices associated with these qualities?
There are, yeah. The book actually highlights a practice called Tonglen. It might sound a little unusual at first,
Okay.
but it can be incredibly transformative.
I'm intrigued. What is Tonglen?
So Tonglen involves mentally taking on the suffering of others and giving out your own positivity and well-being. So it's a very powerful way to cultivate compassion and connect with that shared experience of humanity.
I can see how that could be powerful, but I also wonder if there's a risk of taking on too much of others' suffering.
Right.
Like, how do you not get overwhelmed by that?
It's a valid concern. The book emphasized that Tonglen isn't about literally absorbing others' pain.
Right.
It's more about opening your heart and connecting with their experience with compassion.
Okay.
So it's a practice that definitely requires guidance.
Yeah, I can see that. So it's not about becoming overwhelmed by other people's suffering. It's about using it as a catalyst for cultivating deeper compassion and understanding. I feel like this practice really challenges that me-first perspective that we often have.
Yeah, it's a profound shift in perspective. It's about recognizing that true happiness comes from connecting with something larger than ourselves.
Wow, this is giving me a lot to think about already. It seems like these Buddhist practices offer a really different approach to effort than what we often see in our achievement-oriented culture.
Oh, absolutely. It's not about pushing ourselves to the limit or striving for external validation. It's really about finding a sustainable and joyful path that aligns with our deepest values.
So we've talked about reflecting on death, the 3 types of laziness, and the 4 immeasurables. It feels like we're just scratching the surface here. What other insights does the book offer about cultivating joyful effort?
So many. So many. For example, does it go into how to overcome those feelings of low self-esteem and cultivate genuine confidence?
Yeah, that's a big one for me. I think a lot of us struggle with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great segue into the next section of the book where it talks about embracing the universal self.
Embracing the universal self. Okay, that sounds really intriguing. I'm curious. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so it's a concept that really challenges our typical way of thinking. The book suggests that true generosity, it isn't about painful self-sacrifice because the self, as we usually think of it, is ultimately an illusion.
Okay, an illusion. That's a pretty radical idea, I gotta say. I'm really curious to hear more about that.
It is a big shift in perspective, and the book spends quite a bit of time unpacking this concept. It delves into the Buddhist teaching of the five skandhas, which are essentially the components that make up our experience, our body, our feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. And by examining these closely, we can start to see through that illusion of a solid, separate self.
So instead of seeing ourselves as this fixed, unchanging me, it's more accurate to see ourselves as like a collection of interconnected processes that are constantly changing.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, yeah. And when we start to understand this, it really changes our whole relationship to giving because if there's no separate self to protect, then generosity becomes less about loss and more about participating in a flow of giving and receiving.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. Instead of feeling depleted when we give, we can actually feel more connected and abundant.
Exactly, exactly. And this ties directly back to the idea of joyful effort. Because when we're operating from a place of abundance, then then putting in effort for ourselves and others becomes less about grinding and more about expressing our natural generosity. It becomes a joy to contribute our energy and our talents to something larger than ourselves.
I can definitely see how that shift in perspective could make a huge difference. It's not about forcing ourselves to do something we don't want to do. It's about like aligning our efforts with a deeper sense of purpose and connection. But how do we actually cultivate this sense of the universal self? Is it something we can just decide to believe, or does it require like a certain kind of practice?
It definitely takes more than just intellectual understanding. The book offers various practices for cultivating this insight, but one of those fundamental is mindfulness.
Mindfulness. That's a word we hear a lot these days, but honestly, I still sometimes find myself wondering what it really means in practice.
It's often misunderstood. It's not about emptying your mind or trying to achieve some kind of blissful state. It's really simply about paying attention to your experience in the present moment without judgment. It's about noticing your thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they arise without getting swept away by them.
So it's more about cultivating awareness of what's happening within us and around us rather than trying to control or change anything. Is that right?
You got it. It's like becoming an observer of your own mind. And the more we practice mindfulness, the more we start to see the patterns and habits that keep us stuck in those limiting beliefs about ourselves and the world. We begin to see how often we operate on autopilot, driven by these unconscious reactions.
It sounds like mindfulness could be a really powerful tool for recognizing those three types of laziness we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. When we're more mindful, we can start to see those patterns of, clinging to idleness, getting distracted, and self-sabotage as they're happening.
Yeah.
And when we can see them clearly, we can start to make different choices. Instead of getting hooked by distractions or pulled down by negative self-talk, we can choose to engage with life in a more skillful and joyful way.
That makes a lot of sense. So mindfulness isn't just about relaxation or stress reduction. It's about cultivating greater awareness and freedom in how we respond to life's challenges.
Exactly. It's about realizing that we always have a choice in how we respond to our experience, and that choice is really where our power lies.
That's really empowering, but I have to admit, the idea of, reflecting on death, cultivating mindfulness, embracing the universal self, it all feels a bit overwhelming.
It is a lot to take in, for sure. And the book doesn't shy away from the fact that this is a path that requires commitment and effort. But it also emphasizes that even small steps in the right direction can make a big difference.
So we don't have to become like enlightened masters overnight to benefit from these teachings.
Not at all. Not at all. The book encourages us to approach this path with a spirit of gentleness and self-compassion. It's about making gradual progress one step at a time.
That's reassuring. It makes me feel like this path is actually accessible, even for someone like me who's just starting to explore these ideas.
That's the spirit. And remember, the path itself can be a source of joy. As we cultivate diligence, we start to experience a sense of freedom and purpose that wasn't there before.
So it's not about like gritting our teeth and forcing ourselves to do something we don't want to do. It's about tapping into a deeper source of motivation that naturally aligns with our values and aspirations.
Exactly. And when our efforts are aligned with our deepest values, that's when we experience true joy and fulfillment.
This is really shifting my whole perspective on effort. It's not about pushing ourselves to the limit or striving for external validation. It's about aligning our actions with a deeper sense of purpose and connection.
That's the heart of it, yeah. It's about discovering a way of being in the world that's both meaningful and joyful.
We've talked about embracing the universal self, the role of mindfulness, and how these ideas can help us transform those three types of laziness into sources of strength. What other key insights does the book offer about cultivating joyful effort?
One of the most important things the book highlights is the distinction between genuine confidence and ego pride. They might sound similar, but they're actually very different. So when we're talking about ego pride, it's really about kind of inflating our sense of self and needing that external validation.
Oh.
It can be very fragile. It often leads to comparison, competition, whereas genuine confidence comes from a deeper understanding of our inherent worth and potential.
Okay, so it's not about being better than others. It's about recognizing the unique gifts and talents that we each have to offer.
Exactly. Yeah.
But how do we actually cultivate that kind of confidence, especially when we're faced with, challenges or setbacks?
Well, the book emphasizes that genuine confidence is really cultivated through action, through engaging with life wholeheartedly and learning from our experiences. It's not about being fearless or never making mistakes. It's about developing that can-do attitude that allows us to persevere even when things get tough.
So it's about taking action even when we're afraid or unsure of the outcome. It sounds like we have to be willing to step outside of our comfort zones.
Absolutely. The book has this great analogy. It compares cultivating confidence to the process of training a horse.
What?
At first, the horse may resist the rider's guidance. But with patience and consistent training, the horse eventually learns to trust the rider and move forward with confidence.
I love that analogy. It really highlights how confidence is something we develop over time through practice and perseverance.
Yeah.
It's not something we're born with. It's something we cultivate.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the book offers a number of practices to help us develop this kind of confidence. One practice that particularly stands out is the practice of setting intentions.
Intentions. How does setting intentions help us cultivate confidence?
Well, when we set intentions, we're essentially aligning our actions with our deepest values and aspirations. And this creates a sense of purpose and direction that can be incredibly empowering. Instead of just reacting to circumstances, we're consciously choosing how we want to engage with life.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about taking ownership of our choices and actions rather than feeling like we're at the mercy of external forces.
Precisely. And when we act in alignment with our intentions, we naturally start to feel more confident in our ability to create the life that we want.
It's like our actions become a reflection of our deepest values, which can be incredibly motivating.
Exactly. And this sense of purpose and motivation is a key ingredient in joyful effort. When we're clear about our intentions, our efforts become infused with meaning, and we're much more likely to persevere even when challenges arise.
So it all comes back to aligning our actions with our deepest values and aspirations. That seems to be a recurring theme in this book.
It is. And that's why this book is so powerful. It's not just about, giving us a set of techniques or practices. It's about helping us cultivate a whole new way of being in the world. It's about aligning our thoughts, our words, and our actions with a deeper sense of purpose and connection.
It's been such an insightful exploration of diligence. As we wrap up this deep dive, is there a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important message is that joyful effort is available to all of us. It's not about achieving some lofty spiritual goal. It's about bringing a sense of presence, purpose, and joy to everything we do, whether it's, washing the dishes or spending time with loved ones or pursuing our biggest dreams.
Yes, that's a beautiful reminder. It's not about waiting for some future moment to be happy or fulfilled. It's about finding joy in the present moment in the midst of our everyday lives. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I know I'm feeling really inspired to bring more joyful effort into my own life.
It's been a pleasure. Remember, even small steps in the direction of joyful effort can make a big difference. Start by setting a small intention for yourself today and see what happens. You might be surprised by the results.
That's a great challenge for all of us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the power of joyful effort. We hope you've enjoyed the journey, and we'll see you next time for another exploration of fascinating ideas that can transform your life.